good day, good morning, depending on where you are. Welcome to this webinar on exploration geoscience. Um, so welcome you regardless of your respective fields. If you're a geoscientist, a petroleum engineer, or an energy enthusiast, you are highly welcomed. And we trust that you're going to gain a lot from this webinar. Well, really quickly, peradventure you don't know what SEG is. SEG is an international society that is concerned with geoscience, geophysics, actually, the application of geophysics to solve human problems, among many other things. And this webinar is part of, as SEG in a live chapter, this webinar is part of our attempts to bridge the gap between industry and academia. And we're collaborating with SEG Nnamdi Azikwe University, and the president is here as well. Caleb, can you just unmute and say one or few things?
Okay, good morning, all. My name is Azonyema. Hope you guys can hear me.
Yes,
Hello?
yes, I can hear you, Caleb. Caleb, I can hear you. Go ahead,
Okay,
please.
okay. My name is Azonyema Caleb, the current president of SEG NAU, and it is an honor collaborating with SEG University to drop this program, this insightful program, so that our students can, then get to know each other and learn from the industry experts. So it will be a wonderful thing getting to know you guys. Also, you guys getting to know us. Thank you so much, brother.
All right, thank you very much, Caleb. It's a pleasure collaborating and running this program with you. Um, so if you are from SGNA chapter, let's just do something real quick. Just leave a reaction or just drop a message in the chat. Same thing if you are from Unilag chapter, just drop a message in the chat or leave a reaction. All right, hi Olamide. Is that your okay? Can just leave a reaction, leave a chat in the chat box representing Unilag chapter, representing any chapter. All right, you guys are leaving reactions, but I don't know which chapter you're representing. I guess that's fine. All right. So today we have the pleasure of having a energy professional in our midst who goes by the name of Sayode Jogunano, and is a exploration geoscientist with over a decade of experience in deep water ocean environments. And we are exceedingly glad to have him in our midst and talk to us about the nitty-gritty exploration geosciences, about exploration geoscience, how these energy resources are extracted and found in the subsurface to use to power everyday lives. So without further ado, I'll be handing over to our esteemed speaker for today. Sir Dejisa, you have the floor.
Thanks, Dimladi. Confirm you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
All right, so I will try to turn on my camera, but if the network bandwidth doesn't permit it to stay on, I would have to turn it off. Okay, so please let me know when there are any issues.
I can see you.
Okay, good. So let me try to share again and confirm that you can see my screen.
Yes, I can see it, sir.
All right, great. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm happy to be here with you. So I hope that the next hour and a half to 2 hours would be fruitful for every one of us. Like Demilade said, so I'm an exploration geoscientist for about, I think, 13 years now. And I have, would I say, the privilege of having studied geology and privilege of being able to practice in that same field. Albeit I had a stint in banking, I think 16 years ago, before finding my way to the industry. So I hope that this session, again, it's 1.5 hours, 2 hours is not enough time to talk around, to exhaustively discuss exploration geosciences and its role in the energy industry, right? But I believe that 1.5 hours is enough time for you to pick at least one thing from our conversation that hopefully would influence or guide your decision making as you go through your studies. And ultimately, should you decide to still practice as a geophysicist, as a petroleum engineer, to take that decision post studies. Okay, so it's a pleasure to be here, and I would give this talk. It's going to be largely high level, an overview of what exploration is, how we explore, things we look out for, and of course, we will then discuss some of the challenges we face in the industry. It's nowhere going to be exhaustive, but just a few things from my own perspective and from my own experience, some challenges we've seen in the industry. And that would be a perfect segue point to looking at a case study of one of the wells we drilled recently. This I had shared in the NAPE conference and SPE conference of 2023. So it's possible some of you may have been there, but if not, I'll just give a quick summary of the outcome of that well. Not everything goes according to plan, as you would expect in the industry when you're exploring, and this will be an example to share. Then we'll take a look at the career outlook in the energy industry. Again, like I said, it's possible you are considering, am I on the right path? Is this something I want to do going forward? Do I want to pivot to something else? Is there any career prospect once I'm done? Some of you probably in your final year, you're already thinking, is there hope for this career with this whole energy transition thing, you know? So I'll share a few things. And hopefully you can take that on board while you make your decision. And more importantly will be the Q&A. So happy to take your questions and your reflections from what we're going to be discussing. And if there's anything you need me to clarify, I'll be happy to do that. Okay. All right. So please confirm you can still see my screen. I'm now on the industry value chain slide.
Yes, I can see your screen.
All right, great. So what is exploration and where exactly do we fit in the value chain? So as the name entails, simply put, in exploration, what we do is we find oil and gas. We look for hydrocarbons. That's the simple way to explain what it is we do. Establishing whether we have hydrocarbons in a particular area in the subsurface, and ultimately appraising it. So that's why you see exploration and appraisal there at the very front end of the value chain in the upstream. So it's not just enough. We're not in this for academic purposes. To a large extent, this is a business. I need to make money. So it's one thing to find the hydrocarbons. It's another thing for it to be economic. Hence the reason for appraisal. So that's to establish how big indeed it is. Upon finding your hydrocarbon deposits or accumulations, then there is a transmission, if you will, to the development team or the development function. And their own role is to pretty much decide how best it is to extract this accumulation that has been found. So that means planning development wells, where to situate those wells to get the best or maximum recovery from the reservoirs. That's when I say reservoir now, I'm talking about the tank, if you will, where the hydrocarbons are placed. Right. So this is largely the upstream part of the business, right? So as you can see, in exploration, we are at the very forefront, right? How, and it also entails how you also access what you see, what can be called new acreages. So acreage is more or less like what we call blocks here. So when you held things like bid rounds, like the one held last year by NUPRC in Nigeria here. And so when I say NUPRC, for those who might not be familiar, that's the Regulatory Commission, Nigerian Upstream, the Regulatory Commission, which used to be DPR. And so they are responsible for regulating the industry. So the whole process of even accessing those blocks, because as you know, everything belongs to the government. So you, as a company, if you're coming in to explore, you need to be given the right to explore, the access to the blocks where you're going to be looking for those hydrocarbons. Now, I didn't put on here the midstream, so that's simply what exists, the part of the chain that exists between the upstream and the downstream. And midstream largely has to do with transporting your hydrocarbons that have been discovered to your refineries. Okay, so the unprocessed hydrocarbons we find. So the midstream is that whole system that exists between where you find and getting into a place where you can process your find. And the downstream is where you have a lot of the refining. You can see liquefying the gas, converting to LNG, producing petrochemicals, and the distribution of the finished products to the final consumer. Okay, so that's what basically the industry value chain looks like, right? So an exploration, like I said again, we sit in the upstream part of the value chain. Why do we do this? Why do we explore? What's the importance of this? That is clear. That will be clear to many of you on the call. Obviously, it's important revenue generation means for the country, such as Nigeria and indeed other countries. It also boosts economic growth. Of course, the more you earn, the more fines you make. You can imagine that's a lot of money for the country to run its activities. Funding from there to also drive infrastructure development, and indeed energy security is also very key, in the sense that most countries now need to have a guarantee of energy supply, which is something we can't say we have yet in Nigeria. Agree with me? If you even think about Europe as it is, right? So you can even question whether they are to a large extent secure energy-wise. We talk around Russia cutting off supply, to Europe and things like that. So those are things that are of strategic importance to many nations, right? Can you guarantee energy supply? Because this drives development. Every developed country you look at, in some way, to a large extent, the ones that have hydrocarbons deposits existing in their countries, or they have explored in other countries, this drove a lot of their development, right? And it's hard to develop any country without energy supply, right? So this shows the importance of what we do in the industry by finding these hydrocarbons to drive development, to drive power generation and all that. And of course, employment opportunities, which might be relevant to many of you here, right? So we'll be looking to working in the industry upon completion of your studies. So just a high level of why we do this and where we sit. So moving on to the next slide. What do we do as geoscientists, right? Basically, what we do aside just saying, well, we are the ones saddled with looking for the oil and gas. That's the simple way you probably would answer a 5-year-old, right? So I'm the one responsible for identifying where those deposits are. But embedded in just that simple sentence will be things like going to the field. And some of you are probably already involved in a lot of field work exercise. And this would entail going to the outcrop on the surface. That's what you can see. And why is this important? We can't see the subsurface where we drill these wells to, but we need to understand what it is we're chasing. And the next best thing that we have access to are exposures or outcrops we have at the surface. So what you see at the surface basically is what exists in the subsurface. So you use that to help your understanding of what is in the subsurface. When you're drilling your well, it gives you an idea of where do I think the best possible part of the reservoir will be, and that guides your modeling as well as situating your wells. We also, as geoscientists, acquire and process relevant data. So for a number of you on the call who are geophysicists, something you would have heard of. So acquiring seismic, which is the bread and butter of the industry, even gravity, magnetic data, and all of that, and processing this data, putting it in a form that can be interpreted by the interpreters. So many geoscientists as well end up being seismic interpreters. So it's one thing to acquire the data to process it, but then you have to be able to interpret it, convert it to something that makes geologic sense, upon which you can plan a well to discover and then to extract your hydrocarbons. Aside the seismic, things like cores that are acquired in wells, logs, well logs, we make interpretations to alongside with our petrophysicists of well logs to help understand the rocks better. And the other element is understanding what the petroleum system is. Petroleum system, basically everything that needs to be in place for you to have an accumulation of hydrocarbons, right? So there are certain elements that have to line up for you to be able to have a hydrocarbon accumulation. So those are the kind of things we try to define and establish, and also be able to prognose. When I say prognose, can you predict whether indeed you have hydrocarbons in that reservoir or in that structure you are looking at, right? Or the prospect. So this is just a high level itemization of the things we do as geoscientists. Okay, just to check, am I still with you guys? I get a confirmation.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we can clearly hear you.
All right, great. Okay, so I've moved on to the next slide to talk about the petroleum system that I mentioned on the previous slide, right? So again, I'll try to keep it really high level for maybe those who are just starting off, maybe 100 level students or 200 might be on the call. Some of you who are more advanced would have an idea what this is. So think of it like a tree, right? As we progress from a petroleum system to plays and then to prospect. Your petroleum system refers to, if you will, you are looking at the large scale, more like a basin. So the Niger Delta Basin, for example, which we have existing in Nigeria. So do I have a working source rock? Do I have a rock that generates hydrocarbons in this basin, in this very huge area? And if indeed I have that working source rock or unit that generates hydrocarbons, all the other elements that would lead to those hydrocarbons being emplaced in a scenario where I can extract commercially, or maybe not even commercially at this point, because regardless of economics, but at least where I can prove the existence of these hydrocarbons. That's what the petroleum system refers to. So think of it again as a tree. You're now looking at the stem, right? So that's where everything comes from. All the elements need to somehow exist in space with respect to a particular source. Then, if you move up a bit to the final scale, you now have a potential group of hydrocarbon fields that are related to each other, maybe by age, right? So then you're getting to the play level. So when I say by age now, you can be referring to maybe, for example, the tertiary play, where we have our hydrocarbons in the Niger Delta. You can go maybe to another basin, let's say the North Sea, which is the UK, offshore, the North Sea, UK, Norway, and all those countries in Europe there. A different basin where they might be looking at another place, say in the Jurassic, or maybe somewhere in the Cretaceous, right? So those plays are linked by age or by stratigraphy, right? And in that stratigraphy or in that play, you could have different groups, individual groups of accumulations, individual accumulations that make up the play. Play can also refer to maybe not just age alone, but also you're just talking about general lithology. So when I say lithology now, maybe I'm talking about carbonates, like we have in the Middle East. And I can be talking about, oh, I'm interested in, if you can hear someone say, I'm interested in chasing the carbonate play. So you may also have clastics in that area. So when I say clastics, now I'm just referring to sands and shales to a large extent, compared to unlike carbonates, where we're referring to, like the name entails, casual carbonates, or all these other organisms that generate them. So if you're talking about carbonate play, it's not talking about the kind of lithology you're chasing, right? In this case, which would be carbonate. So I'm chasing my clastic play. I'm looking for the sands and shales in the system. So play just tries to tell you about how whatever it is you're chasing, how they are linked, or that they are connected somehow, geologically related, right? Now they exist in groups. So it's not just when you talk about play, you're not just referring to an individual accumulation. And that's where prospect now comes in. Prospect now talks about the individual hydrocarbon accumulation. So like a potential trap, like the name entails, that contains hydrocarbon accumulation. And that is what you drill. When you want to drill a well, it's a prospect you're chasing. So you've been able to hopefully define a container or a configuration in the subsurface where you believe that your hydrocarbons are emplaced or are trapped. So you can't just say, oh, I want to drill a well. Oh, I know there's a working petroleum system here in Niger Delta, so I can just go and stick my well anywhere. No. Because like we said, petroleum, they are looking at the basin scale. Where exactly do you put the well? So you move up to a certain level of detail. Okay, in the Niger Delta, what play do I want to chase? Do I want to chase the Cretaceous, which is just older than the Delta, or do I want to chase the Tertiary, right? Most of the drilling, most of the discoveries we have in Nigeria to date are in the Tertiary. So your Agbada, your Akata, all those formations are mostly or Miocene, like tertiary plays. But doesn't mean we don't have the Cretaceous. There are some wells that are found a bit offshore Lagos that actually tested the Cretaceous and did find some hydrocarbons in the Cretaceous. So that's a different play. So there are some companies that are actively chasing the Cretaceous play now, for example. Now, but even in that Cretaceous play, you have to define exactly where it is you want to drill, and that's where you now have to define your prospect. So in that Cretaceous play, in the interval of the Cretaceous, where is that configuration that I want to chase, that I want to situate my well, and that makes your prospect. And so that is what we do. So when we explore for hydrocarbons, we have to be able to define prospects. And those prospects, certain elements have to be in place, right? Before you are able to define a prospect. So I move on to the next slide as we look at some of, okay, I think I hid that. Okay, I didn't show that. So yeah, some of the elements. So now we're looking at I'm on the slide with the geologic play elements, right? So what are those things we look out for? So when you're saying you've gone into a petroleum system, you're trying to define a prospect. So what are those elements that we try to identify? So these things, before you can say you have a successful hydrocarbon accumulation, all these elements must be in place. If one is missing, then your prospects will fail, meaning you are not going to be able to make a discovery. So what are those elements? Number one is the source rock, right? And as you can see in the section, so what, like the name implies, this is what generates the hydrocarbons. So in the Niger Delta here, it's the shales. So shale is a fine-grained type of rock that has organisms that, upon decomposition and all that, subjected to a certain temperature, pressure, those organisms break down, the carbon in them breaks down and generates hydrocarbons, right? So that is what you must be able to establish first. In this basin, I'm looking at, do I have a source rock? A working source rock. If I have a working source rock in the basin, fantastic. Now, do I have a reservoir rock? And that reservoir rock is simply the container where a porous and permeable rock, where the hydrocarbons generated in the source rock are going to be stored. So those hydrocarbons that are generated in your source rock need to be able to migrate from the source rock. So that's migration. So that is as well can be captured under source. You can also hear people use interchangeably charge. When you hear things like charge, so hydrocarbon charge, it's also just basically talking about an existing source rock. So do I have, so I can use it interchangeably while I talk. So that's why I'm saying that. So do I have charge in the basin? Meaning, do I have a working source rock that is able to expel hydrocarbons that is generated, and those hydrocarbons are able to migrate, all still under charge, which we talk about migration, are able to migrate from the source rock into a porous and permeable layer, which again in Niger Delta is sandstone. In the Middle East, mostly carbonates, right? So in the Gulf of Mexico too, sandstones, making up the reservoir rock. So this reservoir rock makes up the second element that you must have in place. Then you need to have a cap rock, or what we call a seal, above the reservoir. So what does the seal do? Like the name implies, so it caps it. So it prevents, it's usually an impermeable layer. So it could be shales, which are similar to a source rock, shale lithology, or it could be salt. So salt too is an impervious layer, as we have in the Gulf of Mexico, in the US too, or Brazil. Now, your sealing lithology prevents the upward migration of the hydrocarbon. So if the hydrocarbon molecule generated in your source rock, you keep migrating through what we have here as a fault. So a fault is simply a break in the rock layer that allows, along which you've had movement. So that provides like a migration pathway for hydrocarbons. And I will speak a bit more in the case study about how this migration through faults is very critical for hydrocarbon emplacement. So, like I said, the sealing lithology above needs to be in place to be able to establish that. And there's what we call the trap. So the trap is that geometric configuration in the subsurface to hold the hydrocarbon. And that trap, at times, you can hear people use it alongside with structure, or people can maybe split it from structure. In this case, we're looking at what appears to be an anticline. So an anticline, for those who are not familiar with this, is, as you can see, is like a fold in the subsurface of strata or rock layers. And that fold provides a configuration to hold hydrocarbons. So usually your structure provides a focus for your hydrocarbons. So as hydrocarbons are coming up, this fault, for example, and get into this pervious, porous, and permeable layer, those hydrocarbons would want to start going up deep. Oil is less dense than water, right? So when oil or gas is generated in your source rock, it naturally wants to go up because it's less dense than water sitting in the pore spaces. So naturally, it will try to find a way up. So anywhere it sees a route to go up due to buoyancy. It's just going to keep going up. So imagine it's coming up through those faults. Once it gets into this porous and permeable layer, it tries to go up within the porous and permeable layer up. By the time it gets to the crest here, the anticlinal crest, then it stops because it can't go further up because of this cap rock or seal rock, which we have here. So this is how hydrocarbons form and how they migrate, either through a fault, as you see in this cross-section, or through what we call carrier beds, which are more or less other permeable beds and slightly porous beds to transmit them to their final resting place in the reservoir. Okay? So, like I said, if one of these elements is missing, if your source rock is missing, then it means that there's nothing to generate the hydrocarbons. You might have a trap, you might have a reservoir rock in place, you have your structure in place, but if there's nothing generating the hydrocarbons, forget it. If you have the hydrocarbons being generated, but there's no seal, everything will just keep. So imagine if this fault extends all the way to the surface, everything will just keep going up all the way to the surface, escaping with nothing to hold this in place. That is why you see things like slicks or seeps, potentially maybe on the sea floor or maybe even on land, where certain places you just see, why is oil coming out of the ground here? It's because there's nothing to hold that oil in place. And for those who are Christians, who are familiar with the story of Moses and the burning bush, there have been postulations that, well, for that burning bush to happen, potentially that is gas coming out from the subsurface or some form of hydrocarbon. And that's what ignited the bush. Now, that doesn't explain why the bush was not consumed. That's probably something supernatural for us to understand. But that is a common phenomenon in different parts of the world where you find hydrocarbons emanating from the seafloor or from even from land. And that just tells you that there is no sealing lithology above, at least where that hydrocarbon is escaping from. Some people like it because when you see that kind of thing, it tells you that, man, I have a working source rock here. I personally like it when I see evidence to show seeps or slicks, whether in the water column or maybe on the sea floor, because it tells me that means there's an active source rock in that basin or in that area I'm looking at. But others are concerned because, well, that also means maybe your trap is not working or your sealing lithology is not working. So how do you have an accumulation there? Then maybe you're able to comb around your seismic and look for evidence of areas that appear to have the sealing lithology and all those other elements that you wish to see. Okay? So that's the way I look at it. So at least that's evidence of one element. Can I prove that all the other elements are present? All right. So we'll look at this a bit more when we discuss the case study. All right. So moving on to the next slide. So as a geoscientist, and maybe I should say geologist, might have a few of you on the call, we have to make maps. We love making maps, right? And the reason why the maps are good to make, because that's where we'll give you an idea of where you want to situate your well, right? And you share that map with your well engineer, the guys who will plan the well. And so we have to create maps of each of these elements. So what we do is we take, so, I told you about how each of those elements, you have to be able to prove that they exist. Now, let's take reservoir, for example. You look at your seismic. I told you about why you visit outcrops, because then you have an idea, okay, maybe if I'm in a shore face environment, for example, what kind of reservoirs do I expect to see in a shore face? So you go to an outcrop okay, this is a shallow marine environment. Okay, so I can have surface sands there. And if you look at your outcrop, those sands appear to be extensive. If you go along strike, for example, okay, based on this outcrop, it tells me that if I'm in a surface environment, I expect some sort of extensive nature of my sands, right? So reservoir should not be a problem because in that environment, a high energy environment, lots of waves, so maybe the muds are filtered out, so the sands are clean, they're porous, they're permeable. But then your outcrop that you visited also tells you that, okay, but this surface sands, if I go in the deep direction, so that means I go from the distal, from the proximal to the distal, so meaning I'm going from more onshore towards the deep water. It tells you that these surface sands I'm looking at, maybe they extend for just a few kilometers, right? So I don't expect them to extend for maybe 1,000 kilometers. So it won't make sense if I'm looking at maybe 1,000 kilometers. But based on the outcrop I visited, the kind of distances I see are just a few kilometers. So you're already forming a model in your head. And by the time you are creating your map, right, of reservoir to scale, in your head, that outcrop you visit, the outcrops you visited are helping you have an idea of a reasonable dimension, right? So the same thing applies to your source rock. How extensive can my source rock be? So am I looking at, for example, a source rock from a lake environment? How extensive can that lake be? How big, how thick can that layer be? All of this helps you with creating your map. And why is this important? Because ultimately what you will do after you've created a map for each of these elements, whether it's reservoir, whether it's a source rock map, whether it's a structural map, everything you pretty much now stack them up to give you what you call a combined common risk segment map. So why are you stacking them up? Basically, you're stacking them up to see where everything is present. So over this area, like we have in this map, for example, where I have the shelf environment. So if we take the reservoir presence area, I've created a map. And I know that in the shelf environment, which is basically like the surface, where you have a lot of this surface, the surface environment, I beg your pardon, where you have a lot of the surface sands that I mentioned. So reservoir wise, if you think about it, like I said, you've seen from your outcrop that this is high energy, I'm going to have good reservoir. So your reservoir risk there would be high POS. POS means probability of success. So it means what's the likelihood that I'm going to find reservoir in this environment, surface environment. From what I've seen around me, active present day surface environments, I expect to see good reservoir. So yeah, high POS reservoir. As I go offshore, do I expect to see a lot of surface sands? Maybe not, because I'm going into deep water. So for surface reservoir, it's going to be higher risk. You're less likely. But that does not mean, so just be careful. Even though I call this low POS, it doesn't mean in deep water you don't have sands. But the kind of sands you are going to be chasing in deep water will not necessarily be surface sands. You're not going to be chasing what we call turbidites, right? So quite a number of the deep water fields we have in Nigeria fit in this turbidite zone. So this is just, so the context of this is, as I go to deep water, am I likely to find surface sand? So that risk increases, right, as you go more distal. So those are the things you try to put on a map. Then you come to your source rock. So the same way too, where do I think I have source rock and all that? Where am I likely to have the source rock existing? So you create a map. Where is it high likelihood of having the source rock? And where is the low likelihood? So where am I likely to have a lot of shale deposits? Because, we said that shales, for example, carry the organisms, or is the lithology that generates hydrocarbons, for example, in the Niger Delta. So in this kind of environment, where am I likely to have a lot of shale? This is where high energy environment or a low energy. Okay, it's likely to be a low energy environment where I don't have a lot of waves that we know how the mods and all that. So that helps you annotate or define where your high POS is. Then you look at the same thing, structural domain. Where do I have my structures? right? The anticlines, the faults, and all that. So you create all of that on the map. When you stack them all up, where they all line up is where you're likely to have a good prospect, right? Because like like we had explained or defined, is where all these elements exist that your hydrocarbons will be emplaced. And those areas will be what we now call high pos areas. So the likelihood of success, probability of success of that prospect is high. But where some of those elements are missing, then your pos, your probability of success will be low. Okay, and that feeds into deciding which one you want to drill or not. Okay. All right. So let's just take a look at workflow, the exploration workflow in the industry, how it works high level. I said number one is data acquisition. Everything we do is data driven. We need to acquire data. So I said how seismic is our bread and butter. So it's important that we acquire that data or have that data available. And that process of data acquisition or seismic acquisition exists both offshore and onshore. So offshore, you have these boats that tug sources like air guns. They shoot signals into the water column and those waves, signals travel. They travel all the way through the water into the subsurface, and then some transmitted through, and all of that reflected back to receivers being tucked behind the boat. On land, they use the vibro-sized truck, or sometimes some people use dynamite to generate these waves. And all of that is the seismic acquisition. You can have gravity, you can have magnetics, other data types that are also acquired. And you see that timeline can vary, right? Because I talked about access to blocks, right? Acreage acquisition. That can take a while to get access to some of these blocks. And even the acquisition, getting the vessels, the contractor to do this acquisition. Not all companies, in fact, many oil companies subcontract this to other companies. So you have companies like PGS who acquire data. You can have companies like TGS, Fugo. These are all like seismic acquisition companies. Even Schlumberger, I think, does that. This can take 1 to 3 years, can even be more. It's just an average range of acquiring the data. When you acquire that data, you now have to process it. So that's putting this in a format that an interpreter can look at it and make sense of the subsurface. That data processing is where a lot of geophysicists come in. You also come in the data acquisition bit, because they also design how you want to acquire the data. Acquisition geophysicists and all. The processing geophysicists are coming to play where you process the data. And that's basically trying to remove the noise in the data to get it in the format, improve the signal to noise ratio, and get in a format, like I said, that an interpreter can use. Can take from anywhere between 6 months to 1 year and even more, right? And after that, that data is transmitted to the interpreter or the geologist. Could also be a geophysicist too, who will interpret the seismic. So this seismic is what we have here. And that interpretation work too. 6 months, 1 year, sometimes 1.5 years to interpret the data. So what you're trying to do is to move from seismic to geology. Make sense of what the geology of that area is, right? So you transmit seismic data to geologic models. So from your seismic, you're interpreting what kind of environment am I in? What kind of structures do I have? Do I have anticlines here? Do I have faults here? In which case they form structural traps, or do I have stratigraphic traps here? All of that you decipher from the interpretation you're doing on seismic. And when the interpretation is done, right, by geophysicists, then you plan your well and drill the well. So the well planning is done by both the interpreter, geologist in this case. It could also be, or let me use the word geoscientist. this case, because it could be a geologist, sometimes geophysics also do the interpretation. So you plan the well, decide where's the best place to put a well. So where am I most likely to find an hydrocarbon accumulation in this area I've looked at? You generated your maps. So based on your maps, it's clear to you where the structures are, where you are likely to find the accumulation. So along with your well engineers who are going to actually drill the well, you plan that well. Because your well engineers need to know where they are going to put the well, need to know how far in the subsurface that well would go. Right? So this is done together as a team. Other functions play a role, other disciplines play a role. So I'm talking just when we say geoscientists, you have geologists there, you have geophysicists there, you have geochemists there. Everyone has a role to play. In the petroleum engineering function too, your petrophysicists are there. Petrophysicists are those who interpret logs, right? So the physics of the rock, try to make sense of it, right? All of these people work together. And your well engineers, those, like I said, who design the well, how the well bore would go. You are drilling kilometers in the subsurface. You know the pressures at 3 kilometers, 4 kilometers below the surface of the ground will be huge pressures. And those pressures have to be managed. So you need every hand on deck to ensure that this can be done safely. So from planning the well, it can take a year, it can take 2 years at times to plan a well and then to drill the well. The well can take as much as anywhere from 3 weeks to a month to drill to even a year to drill. I have seen a well that actually did a first birthday anniversary in Albania. They drilled this well for over a year. You can have complex wells that way. But on average here, maybe we do 28 days. Within a month, we were able to drill the well to the target in offshore deep water. When you drill your exploration well, the first well, you get data, you acquire logs in the data. I mean, from the well, I beg your pardon. You acquire logs. So logs are just recordings of different physical properties of the rock measured in the well. So based on the well data you've acquired, logs, also cuttings, that's the rock fragments from the hole. When that is extracted, you update your model. Remember, we said that you've carried out your interpretation, your data interpretation. At data interpretation stage, you came up with a geological model. By the time you now actually drill the well, for example, maybe you drilled the well and what you found, you had said that, oh, I have mostly surface. By the time you now drill the well, you now or you are saying that, oh, I have clastics here, carbonates, or mostly clastics. You drill, you now start seeing carbonates. So that your model has to change. Or you're saying that, oh, what I'm drilling here, I expect to see a lot more surface, but you drill and what you're seeing are deep water type sediments. Then that's telling you that your model is not correct. Now, like we always jokingly say, all models are wrong, but some are just more wrong than others. Because you can't see it, you're not there, and most of the predictions you are making, most of the interpretation you are doing is based off of what you know, what you have seen on the surface. But it doesn't mean it's exactly what's in the subsurface that you are describing. But you're trying to make your best educated guess from the data you have. So you refine those models as you acquire more data. You can now decide, okay, you've made the find, you've drilled the exploration well, then you can decide, okay, let me establish how big it is. If you're able to make the find, I need to establish how big this is. Am I going to be able to make money from this? Then you drill additional appraisal wells. So that appraisal well is just to establish how big, maybe 2 or 3, to establish the size of the accumulation. And when you're able to establish that, then you drill, you now hand over to the development team. Development team will now decide how many development wells they need to drill to extract. This does not include the 1 to 2 years I've put there. That 1 to 2 years is talking about you planning and drilling your first exploration well. So by the time you're going to add development wells and all that, you're looking at at least 5 years, so anywhere between 10 years. If you take Shell, deep water, Nigeria, Bonga, where the Shell operates, for example, Bonga was discovered in 1995. So actually, the exploration phase, I think, started in 1993. The discovery was in 1995. And that discovery in 1995 came on stream. When I say came on stream, it means production from that field, the first oil that was extracted from that field for commercial purposes was in 2005. So that's 10 years from when you drilled your first well to when you're able to start producing. So you can see the kind of time it takes, 10 years for you to between exploration and production. So it can be that longer time, right? But it could also be less because that was deep water. Onshore could very easily be 3 to 4 years. Even other countries where a matter of days if you have all the facilities in place already. Okay. So what are some of the challenges we have in the industry? So these are just a few. They are not exhaustive, okay? So keep that in mind. It's a capital-intensive industry. Very, very expensive, okay? Very, very expensive. For example, deep water rigs, so when I say a rig, so that's what drills the wells, can go for as high as $1 million a day. So, like I said, a lot of these activities are contracted out. So from acquisition, even to the well drilling, the oil companies, I'm not sure if many have their own drilling rigs. Some used to, but then the decision was taken, it probably made more sense to contract some of these jobs out. So there are companies who drill, who have rigs, maybe like Transocean and companies like that who have drill rigs and they provide that service. So that means you have to pay them for their service. And what they charge, at times you could have as much as $1 million, $800,000 a day being charged for a deep water rig. So imagine where you're drilling for 30 days, a month on average. So on average, that's about $30 million for the drilling of a well. So $30 million, you convert that to Naira, your guess is as good as mine, what that is, or $1 million, you are spending that a day on a rig. On the land, it's a bit cheaper than that. So you can have it maybe a couple of hundreds or maybe $50,000 and all that, but that's still not chicken change, right? So it's a capital intensive business. You have to lay pipelines, you have to acquire data. All these services are not very cheap. When you are going to an area that is maybe a new area, a frontier area, especially where exploration sits, a place that people have not gone to before, you can see wells. They are drilling exploration wells. Some of the exploration wells go as high as $100 million. $100 million because we are there 3 months drilling. Well, there are wells that have been drilled for $150 million because the assumption is that everything goes well. Everything doesn't always go well. So if there's a plan that, we'll drill this well for 30 days, that's the plan. That assumes that everything goes well. But if something goes wrong, like maybe cement getting stuck or setting inside the hole when you're trying to put the casing in the hole, then you lose a number of days to try to fix the issue. Or maybe as you are drilling, your drill pipe gets stuck. I talked about high pressures. Your pressures hold the pipe in place. You can't remove it anymore. You are struggling to pull it out 2 days, 3 days. Remember what I said, every day, the rig will not tell you that, oh, sorry, we understand that you had a stock pipe, so we won't charge you. No. As far as they're on site, they're charging you, your clock is running, your bill is running. So this happens very often. So whether it's stock pipe or even your logging equipment, what you are using to acquire data, some of these things have nuclear material in them. So at times, some of those tools drop in the hole. And usually the government doesn't want those things left in the hole because they are nuclear. So every attempt must be made to try to retrieve that tool. So it's only if all attempts have failed to retrieve the tool, you now have to get permission from the government. Yeah, I've tried all I can. I can't, but I'm unable to retrieve the tool. Give me permission to cement it, or to seal it up there, to bury it there. They give that permission. But again, just to show you that things can go wrong and as such extend the cost. Apart from that, even from the construction of the platforms for your production, all the other wells you're going to drill, you have to drill 20 wells. So that is a lot of money. Shell, for example, just sanctioned the Bonga North field development, right? It took a final investment decision that they announced. It's going to cost $5 billion to develop that field. It's already been discovered. It's down to just develop, to add wells, to put pipelines that will connect it to the boats where the oil will be extracted from. That's $5 billion. How much is maybe Lagos State's budget for 2025? I don't know. I'm not sure. Is it up to that? I doubt it. Even Nigeria as a whole, I don't know. So that's the kind of cost we're talking about, right? So it's very capital intensive. So that's a lot of money. Now, if you look at the chart here, this chart from S&P Global 2023, it's showing you the number of discoveries that have been made. Hydrocarbon discoveries that have been made between 2014 and 2023. 2023, a couple of years ago. So you can see the number of discoveries have basically halved in the past decade. From about 500 discoveries in 2014, you're looking at about 200 discoveries in 2023. Why? Why is this happening? Exploration, if you think about it, all the very big fields have been found, all the easy stuff have been found. There's been a lot of exploration ongoing for years, for decades. So what is left are the more difficult things to find, the subtle things that are not easy to identify, right? So discoveries are diminishing globally. That's a reason. If you look at the size of discoveries too, as of 2014, looking at about 25 billion barrels, about half of that, less than half of that is what we're discovering 10 years later. So the size of those discoveries are also diminishing globally, right? So it's getting harder to find, the size is also reducing, and then there's that shift towards cleaner energy. Your ethical investors, there are people who would say that they see fossil fuel as dirty fuel, right? Because of the carbon emissions and all. Yeah, rightfully so. The contribution to global warming and all. And some of those investors are now saying, well, you know what? We no longer want to invest maybe in oil and gas anymore. We'd rather pivot to renewables and cleaner sources of energy. So some of them are now challenging, okay, why would they want to put their money in exploring for fossil fuels? So that again reduces some of the investment that you have to explore, right? So because some people are now saying, well, they're no longer interested in chasing this, because they shift towards clean energy. So that balance is now the issue, right? How are you able to still get support funding for exploration? So a number of companies, the exploration budget annually has been reducing over the years. But Shell has somewhat kept their own investment a bit flat or constant for the past 3 to 5 years, because they still believe in exploring. And a few other of maybe the American companies who are not so inclined towards this sort of green energy or cleaner energy stuff as it is compared to the European counterparts. I'm trying to cut down on this. So that's some of the challenge. I mean, think of it as everything is competing for funds. Investors have different competing interests. So there might be the call for investment in hydrogen. There might be the call for investment in solar. There might be the call for investment in oil and gas, or call for investment in the Teslas or other tech companies, as the case may be. So for you to allocate money to oil and gas that you know is getting smaller and smaller, because this is a finite resource, right? It's not unlimited. We have been extracting these hydrocarbons for decades now, and it's not infinite. It's limited. So as long as you're not replacing what you're extracting with new finds, One day you run out. So if you are competing for this same pool of funds, then you have to be aware that you might not have as much to invest in compared to what it was before. Okay, so other non-technical risks that pose as challenges could be, Nigeria, crude theft is something you're probably familiar with pipelines being vandalized, the stealings, and also think about it. If you're an investor, you're putting your money in a business, but then that business is being sabotaged through crude theft, vandalism, and all that. And you're probably going to be asking yourself, man, do I still want to do this business? I'm losing so much money, or my returns are not as high as what it used to be. And if somewhere else is guaranteeing me that kind of return, maybe in investing in some cheap company like NVIDIA and all that, making graphics, then maybe it makes sense for you to take your money there. The returns guarantees you better returns without the headache of dealing with crude theft and all. So these are challenges that we are all quite aware of. And these challenges also go beyond just the company, also the country, because the country is losing revenue due to crude theft. Some of the other issues can even be government policy or fiscals. So I give you an example. In deepwater Nigeria, there's hardly any fiscals for gas. So what that means basically is that if you find gas, there's no framework per se to regulate how you get your returns. Because gas, when exploration was going to start in deepwater, gas wasn't seen as something that was valuable enough to go after. So oil was what people were interested in for different reasons. Even up till now, some people still prefer good old-fashioned oil for different reasons as opposed to gas. You get more, it's more valuable in terms of more returns from what you get. And also handling-wise, gas takes a lot to handle. So those fiscals were not in place. So that obviously would not encourage companies to go after gas deposits or gas accumulations. But bear in mind that gas is actually a very, very, very important and significant resource, especially for a country like Nigeria. I will come to that shortly. Other government fiscals or policies that maybe has to do with tax incentives. You might have heard that ExxonMobil is now big in Guyana. They made a huge find in Guyana a few years ago, and they're going ahead with developing, and a lot of their focus now is on Guyana. Why? Because the returns, the terms of the agreement they were able to land with the government of Guyana was just fantastic. Compared to, for example, the terms you would have in a country like maybe Nigeria or maybe other countries in potentially Europe. Right? So when a country is opening up itself to the world, trying to attract in Anazodo, do you want to mute? Or is there a question? All right. Please confirm you can still hear me. Am I still on?
Yes, sir, you're still on. We can still hear you.
All right, good. So I was talking about a company, when a country is opening up its borders to investors or trying to attract investors. So you can imagine they will make the terms very attractive. So they can maybe tell you like, oh, come, first 5 years, 10 years, you won't pay any tax or something like that, just to attract your investment, or in the case of Nigeria, when deep water exploration was going to start, what they told companies was that, you know what, if you're able to because it was risky going to the deep water to explore, then it wasn't very popular because people were thinking, how will you get sands? How will sands get that far out into the deep water? And most of the sands deposited at the deltas or just in front of the delta, how do you go 100 kilometers into the deep water and you're able to get hydrocarbons in the sands? Sands reservoirs, rather. When I say sands, I'm French reservoirs. So it was very risky and it's very expensive. I also know the cost of a rig now, the deep water rig. So it was very, very expensive. So some of the things the government said was, okay, you know what? If you're able to make any discovery in water depths greater than what's it called now? than 1,000 meters, up to 1,000 meters water depth. Up to 1,000 meters water depth, if you're able to make any discovery, we won't charge you royalty, right? And then Shell goes and explores and finds Bonga in about 1,000 meters water depth. So right at that cutoff. So royalty, at least, gone that way. So if you think about it, so those kind of terms are just too good to attract investors. So like Guyana did something like that. So the terms they gave, fantastic. So if you were a company like maybe Exxon, or you're an oil company, and you're thinking, okay, this country is offering me, let's assume, is offering me 10 years tax-free, is offering me maybe 30% or 50% of whatever hydrocarbon I find, right? Profit on it. But compared to this country where I've operated for like 50, 60 years, and now they are already reviewing their policy. So they take my slice of that pie, because the slice of your pie reduces based on the number of barrels you have produced over the years. So for example, if you produced up to maybe 1 billion barrels in a field, or producing 500 million barrels, maybe your size, your proportion, your take reduces gradually. So it graduates that way. So but you're going into we promise you 50% of what you find is yours. And you are in a country where there's 20%. So please, as an investor, where will you take your money to? You gladly take it to a country with more friendly fiscals, more friendly taxes, right? So that's what so at times when you hear Trump shouting, oh, tax rebate, taxes, because it attracts your capitalists, it attracts your investors. They always like where they get a lot of tax rebates, where there's no, where they maximize their returns. So those are challenges we face, some of the challenges we face in the industry, nowhere near exhaustive, like I said. And let me now segue to a case study and go back to some of the technical challenges we face in the industry. So as I begin to wrap up, so this is a case study of, we call it Deepwater, Tale of a Deepwater Well X. This well was drilled in 2022. Okay, by us. So by the way, this paper, I presented it at NAPE in 2023. It's called the Drilling into a Charged Shadow Zone of a Prolific Niger Delta Field. So if you're interested in it, I guess it should be somewhere on their website or wherever it is they archive these things. You can get a more detailed view. But I'll just give you a quick summary of what happened. Right. So Deepwater Nigeria, Well X was drilled to target a prospect. So on this map, you can see you are looking at an anticlinal structure. So that map is showing the subsurface of what we were targeting, right? So that prospect is annotated here. If you look at these two bright colored bodies, so these are turbidites. So think of them like if you think about it present day, just think of your river systems, your channels, right? Your channels, the way they are. So if you look at this, you can see it's like a channel coming down this high. So your turbidite systems. So similarly to the body you see to the far left, if you can't see my pointer, I hope you can, to the far left, and we are drilled two of these bodies in the field. They are proven to be oil bearing. So those bright colored bodies you see running down the side of the anticline, the flank of the anticline. So we had this body that was running down in a similar fashion, okay, down the anticline towards the south. That was our prospect. So Well X was drilled to target that prospect. So we've drilled two things that look similar to it, and we found oil. So obviously we were encouraged to chase this prospect down dip. So if you look at the pre-drill geologic summary, so reservoir-wise, we believe it was a turbidite sandstone drilled over the anticline, similar to what we had seen before. The structure, we call it a channel over nose. So it's like a channel system on top of an anticline. The charge, or which we can call source rock, like I said, we believe to be coming from the marine shales. The same way the top seal, we believed was going to be provided by the marine shales above the reservoir unit. And our trapping configuration, we believed was going to be a stratigraphic trap, where you can see the sand body, which is this light colored body of the prospect, just grading into the blue. So that blue, background blue color you see on the map represents like the shale. So remember, we said shale is like the sealing, is like a sealing lithology. like salt is in the Gulf of Mexico or shale is in Niger Delta. So we believe that this prospect, the surrounding shale provides the trap as well as the capsule. And the key risk we thought was going to be related to that trapping, that this seal, the shale around the sand will hold the hydrocarbons in place. The probability of success we carried before we drilled was about 70%. So that means we are 70% confident that we're going to find hydrocarbons in this prospect. 70% confident. Now we drilled the well, 2022. We found the sand. So that's a log. This insert here shows the log, prospect sand, very clean sand, 100% net to gross. So pure reservoir, very clean, porous, permeable, about 32% porosity, which is fantastic porosity, very porous, permeable. We found the structure. I mean, we drilled into the structure, the trap, we believe was there, the capsule, there was a ceiling lithology above. So we found those elements. But what we did not find was hydrocarbons. So it was wet. So there's a problem with the charge or the hydrocarbon or the access to hydrocarbon charge. Now, why we say access, the problem with the charge, if you remember what I told you, source is one thing for the source rock to be present. If you remember that cross-section we looked at, there was also an element of migration. You need to be able to transfer those hydrocarbons from the source rock. We know that there's a working source rock in this field because these other two channels, as you can see, we've drilled them and we found oil in them. So we know there's a working source rock nearby in this field. We know we drill so many wells in the field that so working source rock is not the problem. The problem would be how do we get hydrocarbons from that source rock into this prospect? And that was the problem with this well we drilled. And my next slide will try to provide an illustration of what we think went wrong, amongst other things. So this is a seismic section, right, with an annotation over it, so where we did our interpretation and all came up with the map we just looked at now. And your seismic has the annotations of faults, as well as where we think the source rock is, which is the kitchen, the source kitchen, and some of the wells we've drilled in the field, as well as the hydrocarbon accumulations that have been discovered in the field, which are the red blobs. Okay? So what we were able to establish was that our faults are deep-seated faults, so faults that go quite deep into where we believe the source rock is, the source rock interval. By the way, we've not drilled the source rock interval here, the source rock in this field, but we know that there's source rock because we've proven hydrocarbons. So when you say hydrocarbons, it means that there was something generating the source rock. But we believe that source rock interval sits within this interval here that we've annotated here with the black colors. So what we've noticed is that where we have deep-seated faults that extend all the way into the kitchen, you have a pathway, a possible pathway, a likely pathway, conduit for hydrocarbons being generated there to migrate up into the shallower subsurface where your reservoirs sit, individual reservoir bodies sit. So if you look at, for example, these accumulations that we found, right? So take this one, for example. You have this fault, F1, going down to the source. Can you see my pointer? Can you confirm you can see my pointer?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes,
Go
sir.
on. We can see.
Okay, good. So
yes, we can see it, sir. Yeah.
Great, thanks. So imagine you are a hydrocarbon molecule generated in here, and like I said, under buoyancy, you just want to go up. Anywhere you can find a route to go up. So you come in contact with this fault that acts as a pathway. You keep rising. When you come in contact with a porous layer, you enter it happily. And then it still wants to rise, so it keeps going up in that porous layer. And when it can't go any further, maybe it runs out of a porous layer going to a shore, then it's trapped. Other ones come and do the same thing, so it fills down. Other ones go up. Those who are lucky to go past there go up, fill up, and then, in that like manner, keep going up, filling up the reservoirs they come in contact with. We drilled well B. Well B found oil, so it sort of makes sense. That kind of model makes sense because your well sort of validates that thinking. that you have that, okay, if I was a hydrocarbon molecule, I'm going this way. So when you fill up, so think about it. So you fill up the reservoirs you come in contact with. And once you start filling up, so you start backfilling down deep, right? So it fills up deep. So it starts backfilling down deep, backfilling down. So it keeps going down because it's filling up from the crest down. Well, G proves that there's some form of backfilling down deep. Well, C as well. Now, this is well X, the well we drilled. The prospect we're targeting is sitting somewhere. Now, the problem is we don't have any of these deep-seated faults like fault F5 or fault F1 or fault F2 extending towards where you have a prospect. So access to this kitchen, to this source is a problem for this prospect. Okay? You could argue that we have fault F3 here that goes down. But if you were a molecule of hydrocarbon coming up fault F3, and you get into a permeable layer, here, you are likely, like I said, you always want to go up. You always want to go up. So you are likely to go southwards towards field Y to the south. And guess what? In field Y to the south, belonging to another company, Chevron, I think, there's a discovery there. So again, this sort of validates that thinking, that model that hydrocarbon molecule here would most likely go towards field Y because it wants to go up rather than come down and then come back up here. It always wants to go up because if you were to come here, it would need to come down and then come back up. So basically, no deep-seated faults are in communication with these are prospect. Was what we observed when we were assessing this post-mortem, right? And the closest deep-seated fault F3, we believe would preferentially feed field Y to the south. Hence why this prospect was wet. It failed. We found the reservoir. We found the top seal. We found the structure. We drilled into the structure. But we did not find the hydrocarbons because we believe that this prospect did not have access to the existing source rock, which is why a source rock being present is not good enough. You need to be able to walk a plausible, a reasonable path of migration from your source to your prospect before you decide to drill. And let me tell you, you can never be 100%. Right? So at best, it's still going to be based on the data. There are going to be a lot of uncertainties or things you don't know because you are making interpretations based on data, right? Limited interpretation based on data. You are assuming that your data acquisition was done very well. That's the assumption you are making, that there are no errors in it, which is not always true. You are assuming that your processing, your friendly geophysicist, processing geophysicist also did the processing very well, that there are no artifacts, that is, things that are not true or not grounded in reality. That what you are looking at is the actual reality of what's on the ground. You're also assuming that it took out all the noise as much as it could, or some of the data might still have noise. You're assuming that your interpreter, who is now taking this data, also did the right interpretation. That is interpreting correctly the fault, the way it's looking, and all of that. So think about all of those possible sources of errors that would be introduced there. So you can never be 100%, which is why a probability of success always comes with a prospect definition. So you'd always hear things like when you go to management and you're making a presentation, I like that, this is a prospect, this is what I think we should drill. The person to take the decision is probably asking you, okay, so what's the pos on this prospect? Meaning, what's the probability of success? And that's why before we drill, we were quite confident. We went with 70%. But you can see, 70% is never 100%. You're only saying that if I drill this 7 times, if I drill this 10 times, 7 times out of 10, I will find hydrocarbons. But it doesn't mean that 3 times out of 10, you will not find it. It means that 3 times out of 10, you will not find anything. And this is an example of one of such 3 times out of 10 we drilled. right? And this is the case with exploration. It is always fraught with risk. You are never 100%. Unlike where you've made the discovery and you've handed it to development, you've already found the oil. So it's not like there are still surprises you can get in development space, right? Because there are still uncertainties you deal with. The reservoir might not be as good as we thought it was. By the time you start producing, you find out that, you say, I found 15 million barrels. By the time you start producing now, by the time you get to maybe 20 million barrels, you just start seeing water coming out. Where's the rest of the oil now? We thought this thing was better than. So there are still all those uncertainties. But there is a question of how much you can get out. Unlike exploration, where the question of more of, is it there or not? That's why we talk about risk. And that is the difference between risk and uncertainty. In risk, is a question of what's the likelihood that this thing is there? So it's either it is there or it is not. So all these ones that you are giving even a pause that I'm 30% sure is there. So in reality, it's either it's there or not. But those percentages help us with decision making. So imagine you have a portfolio of leads. Company like Shell, for example, and many other international companies, they have a portfolio in the Gulf of Mexico. They have a portfolio in the North Sea. They have a portfolio in Australia. They have a portfolio in, say, Qatar. They have a portfolio in Egypt. They have a portfolio in Nigeria. You want to decide how you want to allocate the funding, how you're going to drill your wells and all that. There has to be a metric you're going to use to judge amongst other things. So some of them so the cost comes into play as one of those metrics, not the only thing. Cost too comes into play. So the pause, you're telling yourself, okay, this one is 30% pause. Okay. So that means that I'm only 30% sure there's something, and this other one is 70%. So if you are making your decision based on pause, you most likely want to go and do the 7% because you think your chances are better in making a find. But this well showed us, even your 70%, even your 90% pause prospect can fail. And that's the business. That's what it is. You never know until you drill. You never know. A 20% pause, a 15% pause can also give you something that is huge. Huge. When Bonga was discovered, I think it was between 40 and 50%. And now the field has produced over 1 billion barrels. And it's going to produce another 300 million or so from Bonga North to go. And at the time the decision was taken to invest in Bonga, deepwater field, the volume of oil that was predicted was about 500 million barrels. That was the volume when they made the discovery, and when they decided to invest, they said, we're going to get our 500 million barrels. To date, we have extracted over 1 billion with another 300 million to go without even adding Bonga North yet, right? So again, like I told you, all models are wrong, but some are just more wrong than others. But this one is a pleasant surprise. So the same way, even with discoveries, there are still things you don't know. So with exploration, there's a lot you don't know when you go in. And this is just one of the stories of a well that didn't turn out too well for us in exploration. Okay, so I think that's all I have to share. I hope I've not taken too much time. So happy to take whatever questions might be available. Thanks, ladies and gents.
All right, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for sharing with us a lot of experience. It has truly been a very insightful session, and we've learned a whole lot. We have things to think about. All right, so it's time for our Q&A. So if you have any question, just raise your hand and I'll call you. So let's do it in another fashion. Sorry, Caleb, do you have a question? Caleb, can you hear me?
Yeah, hello.
Yeah, do you have a
Hello?
question? Your hand was.
Yes, I
I
have
can
a
hear you,
question.
Caleb. Yeah. Okay, go ahead,
Yeah,
please.
I have couple of questions. Sorry, can you hear me?
Please go ahead, Caleb. Can hear you. Always speaking. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for the insightful a new thing today. So back to that your seismic image, the interpreted one, ones that the faults are being shown and gas,
Okay. Okay. Is it up?
Said you made mention of feeling where you point. Maybe my network wasn't good enough to capture what you
I'm struggling to hear Caleb. Is it just me?
said.
No, it's not just you. Caleb, your network is glitching. Is it possible you type your question in the chat?
Which the hydrocarbon migration.
Can you type in the question, Caleb, because your network is a bit choppy. I'm hearing. Hello? Am I still being heard?
Yes, we can hear you, sir, loud and clear. All right, so I think Caleb got the message. Olamide, please go ahead and ask your question.
All right. Good afternoon, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Right, thank you for the wonderful class, sir. My first question, I have two questions. I would like to know, during drilling, for example, you want to drill for your exploratory well, that's the first well. Let's say you get to, or you already have your proposed where you meet your oil water contact and all that. But let's say during the real thing, because like you said, geoscience is, the subsurface is very ambiguous with whatever seismic interpretation we do. Let's say the depth that you expect for your oil water contacts and all that, you've not got into it, but you have the, let's say you are seeing similar substances, like the soil is tiring what you should find normally in that subsurface. Can you keep asking them to drill even though you've gone beyond the depth of interest? And I know it's the exploration geoscientist that usually does this, that they're always in line with the drilling to inform them where to drill for that. I don't know if you get that question. Hello? Can anyone hear me?
Yes, Olamide,
Yeah,
I
sorry.
can hear you.
Yeah, sorry, I was acting up, so I missed the bulk of the question. Can you repeat it, please?
All right.
Can you hear
So
me?
let me. Yeah, I can hear you, sir. I said I have two questions. The first one is, I understand that we have to, because I interned recently, so I understand we have two types of geoscientists in the oil and gas. For example, the E&P companies, we have the production and the exploration geoscientist. So my question for you, now that we've seen, okay, the interpreter has done their part, everybody has done their part, and we already have, let's say, a reasonable POS, like possibility of success for a well. Now it's time for drilling, right? So we start drilling, and the point where we are supposed to see possibly, let's say, our contacts, now we are not finding them because let's say let's just say the point you're supposed to see your contacts, your oil water contacts and all that, you are not finding them, but you can see similar soil type that identifies that yes, you are getting close. As an exploration geoscientist, is it possible for you to keep asking them to drill further and further and further, even though there is money? Listens that it's always it's tied to money, and there's limited expenses that is given to all these kind of things. So can you just keep telling them to drill further, go in this direction, even though it's not in line with the plan or the map that you drawn out? That's the first question. Please confirm you can hear me, sir, before I go into the second one. Hello, can anyone hear me?
Yes,
I can hear you. Olamide.
Yeah, I can hear you.
It seems to having.
Sir, can you hear me?
Give me a minute to
Since
switch
it's
my
having a bit
sorry.
of
Let me talk.
network
Maybe it's also the
issues.
camera taking.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can hear you,
Yes, I can
Olamide.
hear you.
All right.
I can hear you.
I'm trying to
Sure.
sorry. Let me
Okay,
just
so
switch my
sir,
let me switch my network, please. I think this network is now acting up. So let me just give me a minute.
Okay, so
Okay. Hello.
hi,
Can you hear
sir.
me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right. All right. So
Right.
I'm just stopping sharing and yeah, let's go. Yeah, please. Let's try again.
Okay, sir. So, like I mentioned earlier, I have two questions. So the first one is, I understand that in the industry, for example, the EMP companies now, you have the exploration and the production geoscientist. So my question is, when you finally, after the whole interpretation and all that of your seismic data has been done, and then you have your perspective, drawn out your map and all, so you go into drilling, and all the designing for the acquisition has been done properly. So you go into drilling and then you are starting to drill. But let's say the depth at which you are supposed to find your, let's say, crude oil or your hydrocarbons, for example, you are not getting it there. But you are seeing possible soil types that indicate that or things that indicate that there is still oil there. As an exploration geoscientist, can you keep asking them to drill deeper and deeper, or just to just keep doing things so that you can extract so you can find oil, because an exploratory well you are designing? Or is it that you have to, I don't like, can you ask them to keep drilling, or you just have to close up when things don't go as planned? For example, you don't meet the oil water contact when at the exact depth that you've proposed for it to be found. Because sometimes, like you said, the subsurface is very ambiguous and you can never tell what you are proposing. And I know there are uncertainties, but if you've gone beyond that uncertainty part, is it just advisable to stop all exploration and agree that it's a dry well, or you can still keep going further to find? Because I know it's also tied to expenses in the industry. That's the first question. The second question is, for example, you drill dry well. Let's say you drill 3 dry wells, because there's the first exploratory, and I've heard someone saying something about drilling 3 dry wells in the industry. I can't remember where I heard that from. But does that fault fall back to you as the exploration geoscientist who said, go ahead, we have IPOS? Do they blame you, or tell you to leave the company for something like that? Or it falls back to those who were the qualitative interpreters and all that behind the scene? So who takes the blame? That's what I'm currently asking for. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Nnamdi. Good one. So let me confirm you can hear me.
Yes, I can,
That's
sir.
okay. I can hear you.
Good. So the first one, yes, you can ask. The simple answer is yes, you can ask the well engineers to keep drilling if you've not seen what you hope to see. But that decision has to be taken together as a team. Everything we do, everything you do as an individual member of the team has implications on not just you, but every member of the team, and even people that will be on the rig drilling the well. Now, I give an example of this last well with this well case study I shared with you. I was the one who matured the prospect. So matured meaning I did the interpretation. I did the work that underpinned the decision of management to sanction us drilling that well, right? Even though the work was reviewed by other experts within the company, as well as our partners, right? So the partners, it's not only a shell well, right? So we also have other companies who partner with us in drilling the well. So they also did their own work internally. And on the field, and I was also opportune to be on the rig when we're drilling, right? When we hit the sand, where we thought we had drilled the prospect, and okay, we're seeing the sand from the readings. We saw the sand, like okay, but we're not seeing the hydrocarbon from the logs. The resistivity log was not showing any indication of hydrocarbon. Then the question now came: is this the sand we actually expect to see? Are we drilling? Is this the sand we targeted, or this is just another sand? And that is possible that we're in another sand and not necessarily the one we target. It's possible because remember what I said about all the interpretation. So seismic, for example, is acquired in time, right? So that means your well engineer is not going to drill your well in time. When he asks you, how deep is this well? I won't tell him the well is 2 seconds deep. That doesn't make sense to him. I need to tell him the well is what? 2 kilometers deep or 3 kilometers deep. It's based on that he's going to design as well. So that means I need to be able to convert my seismic to depth, from time to depth. Now, in that conversion of time to depth, things can go wrong, or there might be some inaccuracies. There might be some errors introduced in that conversion because they are making a lot of assumption that, oh, the rock is the same, everything above is the same. There's a lot of assumption you're making, which is why when you're doing that conversion and when you have come up with a number, you normally put an error margin on it. So you say that, oh, after you've done your time to depth conversion, if that reservoir depth is now at, say, 2 kilometers, you say that this depth of this reservoir is, say, 2,100 meters below the sea level or below the waterbed, whichever reference you want to use. Let's use below the sea level, plus or minus 50 meters. That can be an uncertainty because that's the uncertainty range from the conversion you've done. That uncertainty range can vary. So if, for example, if my target is 2,000 meters, right, 2 kilometers, and I'm drilling and I've gotten to 2,000 meters, but because I have an uncertainty of 50 meters, I tell my well engineer, well, it's possible I've not gotten to that target. So please continue drilling another 50 meters. Now, when I get to 2,050 meters and I've not still seen what I think I should see, and I think we should continue, then I need to quickly call a meeting. The well engineer will be there. The other experts will be there. Your team lead will be there. Your peer-reviewers will be there. Other people that contributed towards you defining the prospect will be there. You now ask yourself, okay, do I think my time to depth conversion was wrong? Is it possible that I'm still deeper, or is it possible that I am off? That even my surveyor has totally thrown me off because I'm assuming my surveyor pointed us in the right direction, gave us the right coordinates. We have cases whereby the coordinates are wrong. You use a wrong transformation system and you now put the rig in a wrong location, 100 meters away from where it should be. Obviously, you won't see what you're looking for. So yes, you can say keep going beyond what you defined initially. But what you try to prevent is all of these possible scenarios, you try to articulate them before you actually start drilling the well. So we have what we call like a decision tree. On that decision tree, what you're trying to say is, if I meet this outcome, what will my decision be? So you should have tried to think through, okay, what if I get 2,050 meters, if I don't see it, what will I do? You can say, okay, I'll drill another 100 meters. But then if I'm drilling another 100 meters, it means that I'm going into higher pressures. The deeper you go, the more pressures you have. It means that I should have also tried to interpret any potential hazard that might be there. So you can't just take that decision without having looked into the potential risks of going that far. So upfront, you may have decided to look at, okay, I'll drill up to this depth. I'll do another plus or minus 15 meters. Worst case scenario, maybe I'll do another 100 meters. But then I have to have looked at it. Am I going to drill to a fault? Am I going to drill into a risky and unstable zone in the subsurface? All of that. Because the danger of taking a decision to continue drilling without understanding the kind of pressures you are going into is that you end up with a blowout. Because your well engineer, remember, you have told him you are drilling to a depth. Based on that depth, and the periphysicists was, they told him the kind of pressures to accept. So he's going to design his well to be able to withstand those pressures, the mud weight and the kind of pressures he would need to keep that well open and not the well to collapse, or not to allow anything it finds in the well to come into the bore, blowout. So all of that is factored in. So that decision to continue drilling must be carefully weighed, the risks sufficiently articulated, and the mitigation in place. If all of that has not been done up front, is it something that can quickly done? You tell them to stop drilling, give you like what, 4 hours, that's extra cost, and before that decision is taken. If not, you just call TD. It's better for you to declare it a failure than for you to end up killing people, because you drill into a high pressure zone that your well cannot handle, and then there's a blowout that kills everybody on the rig. Now, back to what my own experience was on the rig with this well we drilled. When we drilled and then we go into the sand, we're like, what's happening here? This looks like sand now, but there's no hydrocarbon. This thing looked very, very convincing, 70%. We kept drilling, and we're still in the sand. So the sand was even better than prognosed. So at the point we're asking ourselves, man, how far do we want to go? So I was so tired, I think I had not slept in over 24 hours. So I went to sleep. So the well engineers kept on drilling. And by the time I woke up in the morning and went back, then I heard that a decision had been called. So my boss had pretty much given the decision to call TD, because we had now exited the sand. There was now the question of whether how much further do we want to go, right? So because there's a possibility this is not the sand we're targeting, but then the question now comes, how far do you really want to go? So the decision was taken that we'll drill another 100 feet. These 100 feet we're going to go, the pressures still look like pressures we can manage.
Can anyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sure, I can hear you.
Okay, it seems it's having a bit of network issues again. So let's just give
Even
him
from my
a
own end, I
minute.
think.
Yeah, our speaker is having a bit of network
You say,
issue.
man, let's go for the remaining to continue drilling. If you keep making finds, the interesting thing with exploration wells is they go as deep as they can until they can't go any further. Maybe when the pressures now start getting unmanageable, then they stop. So that also happens. But it's better to always play safe, whereby you try to define up front what your responses will be, so that you're not just running helter-skelter, trying to just make decisions on the spot. So that's how I would answer the first one. You go as far as you can and as safely, but all must be done safely. The second question as to who takes the blame. So fortunately, I work for a company where that doesn't happen. So I can't say the same for other companies, but I can speak for the one I work for, Shell. You don't take the blame because it's a joint decision. Remember, you didn't single-handedly choose to invest. You don't have that authority to invest the company's money as a geoscientist. The best thing you do is to provide your technical opinion on a prospect. This is what I think, and this is why I think that this would work. And I've given you a probability of success, right? I didn't come to tell you that I am 100% sure that we'll find something here. So if you don't find anything, it only means that you've come within that range that that failure, you've come into the failure scenario, the failure case. You've hit the failure case, which is a possibility. And the company doesn't do that. The company I work for, Shell, doesn't do that. They don't penalize you because, like I said, that decision is taken as a whole. Your work is reviewed by the reviewers and the assurers. There are people who are paid to review the work, who are staff, who take that decision that, yes, they sign up that this is good. We've looked at it. Yeah, this guy has done the work and this looks good. Sanction. The decision maker will look at it and say, okay, you're happy with this. He too will look at maybe the money, how much it stands to gain. If this works, I stand to gain this money. So you take that risk. It comes with the job. It's just what it is as an explorer. If you don't like it, then it might not be might not be the line for you to toe. Go after, be an engineer on what you can control and design. But if you're going to be a geoscientist, you're going to be dealing with a whole lot of uncertainty and risk. That's not to say it doesn't happen in other companies. I don't know. I can't speak to that, but in Shelton, it doesn't happen. Nobody takes the blame. In fact, we all own the blame together. Because if it works, everybody gets the bonus, right? Everybody makes money from it. So if it doesn't work, then you can't penalize one person for not making it work. So everybody pays for it. We all share the brunt. That loss probably affects everybody as well. But that benefits are shared, and the results of failure are also shared. No scapegoating. I hope that's clear, Olamide.
Yes, it is. Thank you very much, sir.
Great. Welcome. All right. Your hand is up. I can see your. Do you want to try? Okay? You've typed in your question now. Backfilling in which hydrocarbon move backwards, like in the use of hydrocarbon move from well B to LG. You know what we have always in mind, that hydrocarbon move up. Can you emphasize on that phenomenon? The second question: how do we get into these roles or join the company? I believe that most of us are interested in promoting a career goal. Doesn't your the log review driver? All right. Thanks. So your first question on hydrocarbon always moves upwards. You are correct. And I had said that too, right? That under buoyancy, it's less dense, so it always migrates upwards. But think about it, right? So if you have hydrocarbons moving upwards, so hydrocarbon, let's number the hydrocarbons. So you have hydrocarbon 1, hydrocarbon 2, hydrocarbon 3. So hydrocarbon 1 has moved out from the source rock, right? It has migrated through a fault, found its way into the reservoir rock where the trap is. So it has moved up as far up as it can go. It now gets to the seal. The seal. It can't go up any further, the seal rock. So it stays there. Now there's hydrocarbon 2 coming behind, right? So hydrocarbon 2 goes up. It gets to where hydrocarbon 1 is. It can't go past hydrocarbon 1 because hydrocarbon 1 is already trapped. So 2 is now trapped behind 1. 3 comes in, trapped behind 2. 4 comes in, trapped behind 3. So think of it that way. You are backfilling down deep. You start up deep, so you got into a point where you can't move. So everything coming behind is like piling up behind it. So as I'm piling up behind it, it's like I'm now backfilling down deep. I'm extending down deep, right? So that's what I mean by backfill. So it starts from the top, and then it now starts filling up the trap. When it gets to what we call the spill point refers to where that trap terminates. So any other hydrocarbon that comes in to that trap cannot stay. So it just goes, so it finds somewhere else to go because it's already full. That trap is already full, right? So that's what I mean by the backfilling. So it's not like the hydrocarbon is just moving down when there's room. It would always want to go up. So, but where it's going is already full, so it's now trapped behind. Remember, there's no space, right? So there's water. Water was initially in there. So, but the oil forces out the water over time. So as it's forcing out the water, it's pushing out the water gradually from the bottom. I hope that's clear about the backfilling. So you're right, hydrocarbons always fill and move upwards, but once they start filling from the crest, the top of the container, then it starts filling downwards. And that filling downwards is what I meant by backfilling. Because what's coming in is just lining up behind what's already there. I hope that's clear. So on the second question, yeah, so there's the, Nnamdi probably has the link. If you just go, for example, to Shell Careers, Shell website, and go to / I think it's shell.com/careers, that's where you can throw in your applications when you are done with a service. You can actually start throwing your application before you finish service, while you even start your NYSC, because at times it takes time for that to go through. So maybe by the time they are calling you for the job, then you are done with your service here. So all the interviews and all can be done maybe during service year or towards the end of your service year. So just go to the Shell website, shell.com/careers, and throw in your application once you're done. it helps to intern. So I heard Olamide say she also interned with one of the companies. Demilade also interned with us. That's always a good place to start if you are not yet in final year. If you have the opportunity to intern in a company, apply. So the same way Shell also does the applications on online, you can go online to ask. And people like Demilade would even be able to advise you better because he has gone through that system of interning, and maybe Olamide, how did they go about getting the slots as interns? So if you still have the room to intern, you can let them get the advice off them. I might not be able to advise how that. I think it's also through the website, but maybe they might have had other methods they deployed. For improving, I personally also applied. So I know there might be the skepticism that you must know someone to apply to work in. That was not my own experience really. So I also filled the form. Like I said, I worked in the bank initially. I wrote the Shell test. I did the interview, and then that was it. So it's actually that open objective. So go online, apply, and then you're going to be called. I think now the process is a bit different in the sense that it's online interviewing. I think they do. I think there's a preliminary online interview. Back then when I joined, you wrote the test, you applied to write the test, you write the test in a success, because when you pass the test, you're now called for an interview, like a half-day interview that tests different elements. And what was tested back then, your technical, the test is you share something or some technical work you've done. So it's usually like your thesis, share summary of your thesis. Then they look at how you're able to analyze information. So in my own time, they gave us a whole bunch of random info. So newspaper clippings, articles here and there, maybe tables, all sorts of random information. And then you're supposed to quickly filter through, because in the industry, there's usually a lot of data that you have access to, and you have to be able to quickly go through data, scan data extract what's relevant to what you're doing, and be able to very quickly synthesize the data for use, for what you need it for. So I'm able to filter out what is noise. So that was one thing they tested for them, ability to be able to analyze large data set and extract what's important. And finally is what I harped on around teamwork. They also gave us some teamwork to do. So it was more about testing out your ability to work in a team. It wasn't about even the result of the exercise. It was more about them watching how you relate with your team. So, and those three things that they tested for are still things I think are still relevant to whatever it is you'll be tested for, whatever it is. If you want a career in oil and gas, that you need to be really quite strong in. And so that's what I would say to your second question, is just apply. Vacancies, apply. Go online, apply. Talk to people. And for Shell, that's how it works. You go online, apply, and it works. Don't believe anyone that tells you that, no, you must know someone. That was not, I didn't know anybody that helped with that. And your third question, yes, the logs do reveal the dry well. So the logs, was when we drilled into the well. Remember, so these logs are gotten real time. So as you are drilling real time, it's transmitting the data, you are seeing the log results. So when we entered the sand, that's how we knew we had gotten into the sand. So remember, the cuttings from the well take, depending on how long the well bore is, can take maybe like an hour, 2 hours before the cutting gets back to the surface for you to assess. But your logs are transmitted real time. So you can already see whether you're in a reservoir rock or you're still in a shale rock. So we could see from the logs that there were no hydrocarbons. But then we're now wondering, are we sure? And that was the question, are we sure this is the sand that we are targeting? Or is it still deeper? And that thing around the uncertainty with depth, that, okay, let's drill another 100 feet, we might still come into another sand, because we're expecting a possibly shallower sand before that sand. So after we had drilled 100 feet, we exited the sand and drilled another 100 feet, we didn't find anything, then that CD was called. Yeah. So what your logs do reveal, yes. Your logs reveal your dry well. I hope that's clear. Giwa, how can machine learning and artificial enhance subsurface data interpretation and decision making? Okay, so for the machine learning and AI. So Yes, and that, remember I talked about adaptability, being able to use this thing. So I can give an example of one of such tools and that is being actively deployed in the industry. Yeah. So back in the day when they started out exploring, it used to be on 2D lines, or they interpret with pencils. You draw your maps manually and all that, but all of that is gone now. I mean, now you have software packages, Petrel, proprietary packages in Shell that are used for interpretation. So what it means is what probably would have taken you maybe 3 months, 4 months to generate a map. A software can do that for you in like a week, sometimes in a couple of days. That is all part of technology being deployed, and AI, in a way, also is you can't divorce AI from this kind of a technology advancement. So there's a tool that has also been deployed now. We also sort of deployed a third party in conjunction with a third party. What that tool tries to do is look at, well, I'm simplifying the explanation now so it's clear. So what it does basically is it looks at seismic. You feed it with seismic gathers or seismic data. You load the seismic data, and then the tool looks at that seismic data. You train it. You tell it, look at these responses on seismic. These seismic responses, look at all of them. This response we're looking at is oil because you've drilled it before, right? So you are labeling the seismic or labeling the data. You are giving it labels, which is more or less training your AI now, telling it that this is what an oil response looks like. This is what a gas response looks like. This is what water response looks like. Now, look at this area. You now give it a fresh data set, or maybe that same data set, but over a much larger area. You now tell it, find me oil in this data. Basically, what you're telling it is that find me everything that looks like this seismic response. And it does that for you in what? In a matter of hours, a couple of hours. Right? What can take 6 months at times to a year. Then it can do that for you in like hours. So it very quickly now gives you everything that looks like an oil response, everything that looks like water response. But what the beauty of AI is, it speeds up that process. But that does not replace geological thinking, geophysical thinking, because we've only trained it, so it's just done the work faster. But it's now left to you as a geoscientist to look at what it's showing you, because it's not going to be 100% accurate. So it doesn't mean that everything that is showing you is oil. It's just telling you that everything I'm showing you looks like what an oil response is. Now, there are certain things that can give you an oil response. We call them false positives. If your reservoir, for example, is very porous, is very clean, very fantastic, sometimes it can look like an oil response. And if you remember the map I showed you guys, if I showed you those three, that map, if I didn't tell you that those other two had been drilled, and you look at all those three, you're probably going to say, these three things look the same. If I found oil in this one, I'm almost sure I'll find oil in this one. And by the way, that tool, the AI tool I'm talking about, also predicted that this well we drilled was going to be oil. So AI helps you do things faster, but it doesn't necessarily replace the geoscientist. You still have to look at other things. There are other things we missed, or maybe not like we missed, that maybe we should have paid attention to. Now, in hindsight, when we did the after action review, would have maybe helped us reduce that pause a bit. But does that mean it would have prevented us from drilling the well? Maybe not. Or at least we would have gone into drilling that well, maybe with a lower pause, meaning that it wouldn't have come as a surprise so much. If you tell someone you're going to drill a 20% pause well and it comes out failed, they'll say, oh, well, the chance of success was low anyway, so we're not surprised. But the problem is when you're telling someone you're drilling a 70% well and then it fails, then you have some questions, which we did having in the company at that time. And not just us, but even our partners too. Had the question thrown at them. But you guys said this is 70% now, especially when you are now talking to people who are not necessarily geoscientists, maybe like engineers or decision makers who like exacts. which is more, which are more exact, unlike us geoscientists, who are very much happy with uncertainties and all. So that's how AI helps. So it helps with faster decision making. That's the simple answer. It helps with faster, because what will take you 6 months to do, you can get done in a couple of days with AI. But then, like I said, it is not infallible, right? You still have to put your geologic thinking or geoscientist thinking behind it. How can advancements in remote sensing and satellite imagery contribute to surface exploration and geological mapping in oil and gas? So remote sensing and satellite imagery, that we use that as well. I know I was involved in a project whereby we use satellite images of slicks on the sea surface. So we're trying to look for evidence of source rock presence, right? And one of such evidences is existence of slicks. I know, like I told you, I'm a school of thought that I'm happy to see slicks. I like seeing slicks because it tells me that there's a working petroleum system here. There's a working source rock. So all I have to be able to do is to look for an area in that domain that has all the elements lining up. A trap, a reservoir. I know the source rock is present, a structure, all of that is sealed. All of this, so your satellite imagery helps with locating, as an example, where those slicks are, which was what we used in some of the projects that I've worked on in time past and even of recent. So of course, you can imagine whatever advancement there is will benefit you. So the fact that you have satellites, so now there are satellites you have satellites orbiting the Earth. There are so many satellites now taking images all around the world, orbiting the Earth. And some of them, every 11 days, they go around, every 11 days, they come back they sample a location. So every 11 days, they come back, take another image around the place. So you have satellites orbiting the Earth constantly. So some of these images are even available on open market in Europe, like satellite images. So the fact that you have all of that available obviously helps with the work we do, right? I hope that helps. Benga Lawal, and please feel free to. I say everyone is just typing in questions now. If you want to voice over it, it's fine. So I can be sure that there are still people on the call and I'm not talking to myself. I want to voice over your question. But Benga Lawal, I'll take your question. Does one have to be in place before one? Yes, fantastic. Yeah, fantastic. So that was one thing I didn't mention. So thanks for raising that, Benga Lawal. So timing is very critical. So that was something I should have mentioned as one of the elements. Timing is very key. Your trap must be in place before your source rock stops producing. So your source rock doesn't produce hydrocarbon forever. So there's what you call the oil window, the gas window. So there's a certain temperature and pressure that you have to subject your source rock to produce hydrocarbons. Once you exceed those conditions, then you burn the source rock, so then it stops generating any hydrocarbon. Now, your trap needs to be in place, either before the source rock starts expelling or while it is expelling. So timing is very important, right? So you like all of them to be in place at the same time, or what I mean by at the same time is they are all present and actively functioning. So when I'm actively functioning, at least source rock still expelling, and everything is in place, fine. But your trap, your reservoir, all of that have to be in place. Obviously, the container has to be in place before whatever is expelling can be kept somewhere. So yeah, sorry for missing that out. Timing is very important. Trap has to be in place, reservoir has to be in place, structure has to be in place before you start expelling or while you're expelling. The second question is increase in global demand, especially gas. I mentioned there's decrease in oil. Yes, how can we understand this better? Yes, so I said that the demand for energy, first of all, is increasing, right? And that's clear. Even from, if you take Nigeria alone, we are not generating enough power.
we need more power than we're generating to drive our development. So that's clear from Nigeria. Same applies to countries like China to drive their industries. Now, that does not change the fact that the size of discoveries are reducing. The number of discoveries being made globally is reducing. And that is because, like I said, all the easy stuff, the big easy stuff have been found. Big on seismic, all the amplitude anomalies. I didn't go into talking about amplitudes and DHIs. What is left are the things that are not so easy to find. For example, I don't think we are the most intelligent. This generation is, I wouldn't say we are the most intelligent of the human race. People who lived 100 years before us were just as intelligent. They made do with what they had back then. We are leveraging on technology now, doing stuff. So human race are very intelligent. The guys that built the pyramid of Egypt, what technology they have? Right. So what I'm trying to say is that there's really nothing new under the sun. You're only finding different, you're only trying to look for different ways of finding them. Now, if we agree that we are not necessarily more intelligent than the guys that were before, so that means all the things that are easy to find, they have found them. So whatever is left are the more difficult things. So we have to get ingenious about how we find the more difficult things that are either smaller or just hard to find. Because if it was easy to find, somebody would have seen it since. Right? So that's why I'm talking about the decrease in the number of discoveries, because all the large things have been found. So it's the smaller ones that are left or the more difficult ones to find. And then there's also people exploring as much as before. I talked about how the exploration budget in certain companies has been reducing over the years for different reasons, because investors are getting better returns for their money, maybe in other tech companies rather than putting it in oil and gas. Maybe investors are also getting maybe a bit more ethical and green and like, oh, well, I want to contribute my own quota to reducing the impact of climate change. So I'm moving my investment from looking for oil and gas, I'm moving it elsewhere to a greener sector. Right? So, but that does not change the fact that demand for energy globally is increasing. And that's increasing because developing countries need to grow. Population is growing. So as their new estates are opening up, as people are moving from the village to the cities, we need more power. Nigeria needs more power for energy security. So all of that is required. Right, so that's what I mean by demand growing, but not necessarily, but the actual discoveries reducing. Okay, I hope that's clear, Benga. And please, if it's not clear, feel free to. Yes. All right, great. So Divine, okay. Can I have access to the slide and audio recording? Yeah, I think Demi is recording this, so that will be made available. Except, of course, the slide I don't want posted on YouTube, but yeah, that can be used for your personal consumption on the energy demand forecast. This thing you explained, does the area topology we consider in data imputed into the AI? And local bounty, can you explain what you mean when you say area topology considered in data input? You might need to voice that over so I understand your. Sorry? Someone say something? Local bounty. Yeah. I don't understand someone understands the question, like, will the AI know about the environment? No, it doesn't. So you tell the AI what, so that's the thing, right? You tell the AI, you train it. So AI is trained. So you tell it, and that's why I explained what I explained the way I did, right? So you tell it, this is what oil looks like on this data set, on this kind of data. So now look elsewhere on this data. So you give it a small sample size. What's it called now? Calibration. This portion here is what oil response looks like. This is what water response looks like. Now check this entire area or check that area and show me anything that looks like oil. Remember, you are the one who has calibrated it. You have told it what oil looks like. You tell it what you want. The data is garbage in, garbage out. What you tell it, it provides to you. And that is very important because it can show you what doesn't make sense. So if, for example, it's showing you water on oil, maybe showing you a water response on oil in the same tank or in the same result, then you know it doesn't make sense because that goes against physics. How can water be sitting on oil? And there are times when you see things like that, you try to make sense, but that's just a simple one. But usually it's garbage. What you feed it is what it gives you, So it doesn't it won't come and tell you no, this is surface environment. You need to have trained it to identify where what surface looks like. All right. Great. So you understand now. Awesome. All right. Any other questions? If I've not explained anything, happy to go over it one more time.
All right. I think we've covered a lot of ground. I think we've covered a lot of ground, and time is well spent. Does anyone have any question before we finally round off? One last question. You can feel free to unmute and speak. Let's hear your voices.
Hello. Can you hear me, Demila?
Yes, I can, Caleb. I can hear you.
It's not a question, it's just a compliment. So I really want to use this medium to say thank you. But the teaching was very insightful, and I actually learned a lot from what I know before. So we are very grateful and we're very thankful. Thank you so much, sir.
Thanks, Caleb. Pleasure. I picked one thing. And I hope the back feeling was clear. Explanation.
Yeah. Yes, sir. It was very clear.
Okay. Great. Olamide.
Okay. Olamide, do you have a question?
Oh, that was a mistake. I was supposed to be here. Thank you as well, sir. We really appreciate the class. It was really wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so in the absence of
hello.
I think someone is trying to say something. Hi, Divine. Go ahead.
Yeah. Please. I asked for the slide on the audio recording, and I did not really get what you said, sir.
Yes, so I said Demlade will share the recording. So the slides, no problem. I can send the slides to Demlade. So except maybe that just has to be managed, guys. So the slide on the, what is it called now? On the demand, the forecast, right? So that has to be managed. But every other thing I think is open stuff that can be shared. That's not a problem.
All right, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
All right. So I believe we've had a very productive 2.5 hours. We've learned a lot about the energy industry and how exploration geoscience comes into play. So be the SEG Unilag chapter, SEG NAU chapter, and every energy enthusiast on this call want to use this medium to say thank you, sir, for your time and spending this hour with us to explain and give us a bit of insights into how things are done in the industry. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you all. That's all.
All right. So I also want to use this medium to enlighten you guys about SEG. So peradventure, I believe the majority of us here are aware about SEG and what it entails. But peradventure you are not, SEG is a global organization that is interested in using geoscientific techniques to explore resources and forming a network, right, where we can use geoscience to the good of humanity and the community by exploiting resources, not only oil and gas, there's groundwater, there is mineral resources, there's near surface geophysics, there's a lot of opportunities. And I want us to tap into the opportunities that SEG provide us as the students. There are scholarships, there are upskilling programs like this. They provide avenues for networking, there are internship opportunities, and lots more. So, peradventure, you have any questions about SEG, feel free to reach out to me. I'm going to put my number in the chat, and you can also reach out to our collaborators on this call, SEG Nnamdi Azikwe University. So, peradventure, you're not in Unilag, and you're in NAE here, and you don't know about SEG, please reach out to Caleb. He's here on this call. And if you're in Unilag chapter, reach out to me. Peradventure, you're not in any of these two schools, but I also want to learn more. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm going to drop my number in the chat now. So please, let's try and make sure we leverage this community and the benefits and values that SEG tends to give us, our student members. Our speaker today is also an SEG member. So there's a lot of benefits that we stand to gain by being one. All right, so, okay, I think Benga's hand is up. Benga, you want to say something?
Uh, let me add few things to that too. Hello?
All right, go ahead. Go
Hello?
ahead, Caleb. Caleb, go ahead.
Adding to what Damilola said. Okay, adding to what Damilola said, remember that the scholarship portal for SEG is open, the outreach portal is open, and the chapter report for Faith Camp and other activities are open for the year. So you can go to the website and apply for scholarship and other things, other relevant things. So feel free to ask questions regarding that. Thank you so much.
All right. Yeah, thank you very much, Caleb. Benga, please, do you want to ask a question? Your hand is up.
Yeah, I want to ask a question. Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, sir. My name is Ben Kawal, the NMGS president of Olabisi Nnamdi University. So I was really happy with this session. I really learned a lot of things. And I mentioned at the NAPI conference too. So I want to ask a question now. I would love to have you on a session with Olabisi Nnamdi and Science Department. Can I have your number from Damilola, sir?
Okay, Benga. No problem. And
Okay.
we can connect, discuss what exactly you want. Yeah. So you can get that from Damilola too.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
All right. So peradventure, there's anyone else that wants to network with our speaker for today, you can reach him on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, he uses his name, or you can reach him out on LinkedIn. Peradventure, you have questions or you just wants to talk to him, you can reach out to him on LinkedIn.
Yeah, thanks, Damilola. That's true. Maybe a preferred route. Yeah.
All right. So thank you guys very much for joining us in this session today. And I'm glad we were able to come and do this. I want to let you know that SEG still has a lot more in store for us. We saw there were a lot of questions on AI and data science, machine learning. We'll probably be having a session on that too with another energy expert. So thank you guys very much for joining in. And we hope we keep in touch and we continue to do even bigger things with SEG as a whole. Thank you guys. Have a good one. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.
Jeddah, do you want to say something? Thank you very much, SCGNA chapter, for doing this with us. We didn't get to hear anyone's voices apart from Caleb's, but yeah, we are glad we did this together. Look forward to collaborating more.
Thank you.
Isel, are you on the call?
Yes.
All right, so I think you can end it for everyone and
Is
stop
Olamide
recording
still
as
in the
well.
call?
Okay.
No, she has left. She has left, Caleb.
I think I met her in NAPI conference. So I'm still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, you most likely did.
I mean, she came about.
Yes, she was. She was.
I think I will request a number from you. Do you have it?
Yeah, no problem. I'll let her know. I'll get it
Uh,
across to you.
There is no problem for now. Okay, you guys should take care of yourself. Have a wonderful day.
All right, now, Caleb. Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah. Yes, please go ahead. Go ahead and end the call now and stop recording.